Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I'm also a founder of Clever Photographer, where we help photographers like you and me to start on their photography journey. Now, what I do, I run this photography review show where I try to help you with your photos. So what I usually do, I look at the technical part of the photo, the artistic part, and also I try to give you some tips and tricks on how to edit your images. With the technical part, we look at the things like your camera details, your camera settings, also things like exposure, noise, sharpness, and so on, to try to help you and give you some tips on that. After that, we look at the artistic part. This is where we look at things like framing, main story, main subject, the composition, and all the fun stuff. Finally, as I mentioned already, if I think that it's beneficial and worth it, then I try to give you some tips and tricks on photo editing. As I mentioned, I am Luminar Neo ambassador or Skylum ambassador, so I love to edit in photography software called Luminar Neo. And that's what we're going to be using today. And that's where we already are ready to start with the reviews. However, one more mention, if you want to join us in the future for the photography review show, all you need to do is to jump to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. There you can join our membership for a little fee and get access to this photography review show, access to our Clever Photographer Academy Facebook group, and most importantly, you get access to our monthly photography digital bundles. These bundles offers more than 300 elements, including presets for Lightroom, Photoshop, Luminar Neo, overlays, textures, backgrounds, custom brushes, and so much more. Each of these bundles each month is also wrapped into the certain theme. So for example, for this upcoming month, we have a portrait photography coming, which is usually very popular. So if you're interested to find out more about our membership, jump to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. So now this is all out of the way and we can start. So jumping into Luminar Neo, we are in the catalog module and we're gonna move into today's photos. The first photographer is Caroline and she sent us 2 images. So let's go ahead and start looking at them. So we have this beautiful, almost night blue hour capture of the town with the church on the top, which is beautiful. And then we have this fantasy Lords of the Ring-like capture from the forest with lots of beautiful glow and beautiful contrast. Starting with the first image, let's have a look at the camera details. So this was captured with Canon 5D Mark IV with the camera lens 24 to 70 millimeters. Now from the camera settings, ISO 100, 70 millimeters, f11 and 30th second. So nice and low ISO, which is always the key for landscape photography. 70 millimeters, so obviously nice punch in from somewhere opposite, maybe on the hill or something. And f11, which is generally a good choice. My range of f-stops are f7.1 to f11, and I think this can work really well. And then you have the 30-second long exposure. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. Obviously, the long exposure gives you a chance to keep your ISO down and also be able to use higher f-stop. However, this is a perfect example when the super long exposure, we're talking 30 seconds, 1 minute, and so on, can actually be a little bit tricky because what happened on this image? So you have the town, which in general have a similar level of luminance. So you have these street lights and they all look good and they all have a same power. But then comes a space like the church or space where you can visibly see the street light. And because of the long exposure, these parts become either overexposed like the church or completely burned out like many of these parts here. So actually for this scene, unusually would be better to get a a shorter exposure. And to do that, you would have to adjust your ISO. So you would probably have to go like ISO 600 or 500 or maybe up to 1000 to be on a safe side. Generally with ISO 1000, you can still remove it in a post-processing, and you could also go lower on your f-stop. Since there is no immediate foreground element here, so nothing that is really close to the camera, you could easily go as low as f7.1, and that way you would basically get sharpness all the way through still, but your shutter speed would be much shorter and these elements would be less overexposed. So that's about that for the technical part. For the composition, I think it's very nicely done. I love the foreground with the town. Again, the hill looks really good. The framing of the 1/3 of the sky and 2/3 of the town works really well. So actually it works very well. It's just the long exposure which I would keep an eye on. Moving to the second image, now talking about first impression, I love this. So it's so beautiful, very romantic, very fantasy-like, and definitely something that catch attention. Starting from the camera settings again, similar idea, we are on Canon 5D Mark IV with the 24 to 70 millimeters lens. From the camera settings, ISO 100, f11 and 1/4 of a second. So, from the camera settings, everything is good there. Looking at the image, the sharpness is also very decent. The exposure is good. Now with the shutter speed, if you would have gone a little bit faster, you could maybe avoid some of this motion blur, which is just visible on some of these parts. So that would be the only adjustment I would make, maybe to go like 1/100 of a second or something like that. But and then I don't know what the light condition was, so it's just a guessing, and maybe that's the one thing I would add to it. When it comes to the artistic part, I really like it. I love the mixture of different textures, shades of green, different contrast of the light. I think it all works really well together and create beautiful image. When it comes to post-processing, the only thing I would add here is that it looks just a little bit too warm for me. I think it looks a little bit too yellow. And actually there's a very easy way to adjust that. You can just jump into the edit module, open the develop tool. In the develop tool, open the color tool and just bring the temperature down a little bit while keeping an eye on the image and see what you prefer. It's not a massive adjustment. I think the -7 can work really well, and it will create very subtle difference, but difference which will eventually be quite important and visible. So that's about it, Caroline. I love both of the images, so thank you so much for sending them over and thank you for sharing them with us. Moving to the next photographer, we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we have 2 photos from you, and what I was really happy to see is that we can see the before and after. So basically we have the original image and the new image. So let's have a look at it. Now we have this first image here, which is this quite epic capture of this landscape and mountains. And this is the almost like Ansel Adams edit with this very contrasty and very dramatic black and white conversion. Now we talk about that in a moment, so let's move on. The second one, we have again really lovely mountains, quite typical landscape capture with a beautiful scene, again with nice mountains, nice texture in the sky, and this is the edit after. So let's start with the first photo right here, captured with Tamron, Canon RP Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 100, 41 millimeters, f13 and 1/320th of a second. So from the camera settings, it's all spot on for me. ISO 100, so nice and low ISO, 41 millimeters, yeah, which is perfectly fine for landscape photography. f13, maybe just one step too higher for me. I would stick to f11. Again, for the same reason, there isn't really any element close to the camera, so no need to worry about that. f7.1, f9 would have given you same level of sharpness all the way through, and that way you would have a space maybe of adjusting your shutter speed or the ISO. So shutter speed 1/320th of a second works really well as well. You have pretty much details all the way from shadows into the highlights. So all of that looks good to me. And looking at it, the sharpness is decent. The noise is minimal or none. So the only thing is a little bit of the glare here from the sun, which can be really easily adjusted later. So all in all, very well captured. Now, talking about the post-processing and your edit. So I am a massive fan of Ansel Adams, of his look. I think it's something that is still very popular, very current. The contrast of the different areas and the dramatic look can work really, really well. So I think you did a really good job here of creating similar look and similar idea. The only thing I would suggest to keep an eye on is the level of the black here. So this looks pretty much completely black, as well as the bottom parts here. And there's two reasons why you want to avoid that. Well, first, because it creates really strong contrast and it takes lots of attention away from the rest of the image. And second, because if you would ever want to print this, these areas will be completely black, and actually it doesn't look that great in a prints. So definitely something to maybe keep an eye on. I would make it dark, but less black, so kind of heavy gray. So yeah, just I would adjust that. Other than that, I think it's nicely done. I really like the result, so well done on that. Moving to the second image. So we have this mountain here, and then we have the result here. Now on the original image, you can see a little bit of the cloud here or something like that. Also a little bit of the sun glare, which isn't really necessarily a problem. Now you try to avoid it by cropping the image, which is quite smart and well done. From the camera settings here, again, Canon RP, Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. From the settings, ISO 125, f13 and 1/320th of a second. So all the settings is good, no problem with that. The sharpness is good, minimal noise. So all in all, this looks very good. Composition. Now we have to look at the edited image. I think it's nicely done. I think, obviously, by trying to avoid this little cloud here, you had to crop in quite heavily here, which is maybe a little bit of a shame, but I understand what you're trying to do. In overall, I think the crop is quite nicely done. And actually, the only comments I would have for this image is more for the post-processing. And the reason is that immediately when I look at it, it doesn't look very natural. It's way too saturated for a place which doesn't really make sense. When you look at the original image, where there is that very natural, maybe like a bright yellow glow or bright yellow highlights, here it's way too yellow. So it's a heavy blue in the sky. It's a little bit too saturated yellow, and definitely way too saturated and warm in the greens. So that would be something to adjust. What you could do, just kind of give you a hint, I would just jump into the color tool, bring the saturation down. So let's say here, and then instead of looking at the saturation slider and worrying about the number, I keep adjusting it up and I keep an eye on the image to see where about I like the result. So I think somewhere around here we're getting nice and natural look, and that is -23 on the saturation. Let me show you before and after. I think this actually works much better. So that's where I would start. Anyway, Elizabeth, they are both beautiful pictures. Well done on the edits. Excellent job. Few notes to take and use in the future. But other than that, yeah, again, great photos. And thank you for sending them over. That brings us nicely to Ivana and her two captures. So let's jump to that. This very mystical capture of this lake or river looks great. And then we have this lovely version of selective color with this, yeah, I don't know if it's like a little chapel or praying spot with very nice unsaturated background. Really nice and well put together. So we're gonna start with the first image right here. Sony 6000 with 18 to 50 millimeters. From the camera settings here, ISO 100, f11 and 1/8 of a second. So nice and low ISO, f-stop, f11 perfectly fine here, 1/8 of a second, yeah, giving us a nice shutter speed, giving us nice mist. So all in all, that is quite nicely done. Good level of sharpness, no noise, maybe just a little bit of touch of a motion blur on the boats, which obviously happened with the moving water, but yeah, I quite like it. I think that is really nicely done. There is even little spider web here, so that's really cool. Yes. So technically, I think it's nicely done. I quite like how you capture the fog, that there is quite nice depth to it. So that brings us to the artistic part, to the composition and framing. And this is where I would keep an eye on a few things. First, I think the boat here is a little bit too tight to the edge. Imagine that you would want to print this image. In general, there is always a little bit which gets hidden behind the frame. And in that case, you would be almost touching the boat here. So that's something to keep an eye on. And also, I haven't adjusted, but looking at the image, it seems that the actual horizon or the level of the image seems to be a little bit off. It seems like it's tilting towards this side. So again, that's something that maybe you could look at. Let's have a look at it. If we move it into edit module, open the crop and actually adjust the horizon. So let's say that we get it a little bit more straight somewhere around here and hit enter. I think that will actually help us. Yeah, I think that looks much more natural. But obviously by cropping it, we are losing even more of the details here at the bottom. So that's about this image. Other than that, I think it's really lovely. It's very natural. It has a lovely touch of kind of mystery and natural colors. So very well done on that. Moving to the second image, that is very lovely. Now, I'm personally a massive fan of selective color effect. I think it's something that is very attractive. I think it can really help to add focus and attention towards specific part of the image. And when used well together, I think it can work really well. So what we have here, yeah, the flower standing out is really nicely done. It adds more. The unsaturated sky gives really nice drama. Obviously, the building with the glow behind, or not building, the praying post with the bright sky behind can work really well. So all of that, I think, is really nicely done. From the editing part, now when I look at it, when I see the red here, it seems like maybe there is just a little bit of leaking here of the color coming around the flowers, which I think could be masked a little bit better, just so it looks like there is really just the red and then there is that unsaturated part. Other than that, it's quite nice. I quite like that there is a little bit of color on this saint here. So all of that is quite nice, but I would just play around with this a little bit more. One way to work around it is to jump into the color tool and look for a HSL panel. Most of the current applications have a HSL panel, so you should be able to find it. And what you can do there, you can go into the saturation and basically, we're probably going to find out that this is like a red color. Yeah, let's have a look at it. When we bring it down, yeah, it has a little bit of red and a little bit of orange. Cool. So little bit of red, a little bit of orange. So everything else, we gonna make 0. So we're gonna unsaturate every other color than the orange and red. And after that, once we have this selected, we can close the color tool. And then we're going to open the black and white. And we're going to convert the image to black and white. And after that, again, we're going to go into the masking, invert the mask, and then we're going to go into brush, select the brush. And now with that selected, we're just going to paint over the area we want to make black and white. So we basically going to remove the color from the wall, making sure that it really is only the flowers that will have the color in them, not the wall and other parts. So let's do this. Let's do this. Obviously, you could spend more time on it, just maybe play around with the details. But this is a good start. When we zoom out, I think that looks a little bit better. So that's it for this. Let's go back to the catalog. Again, it's a lovely, lovely capture, Ivana. Thank you very much for sending it over. And I hope maybe I can see more of your pictures in the near future. That will bring us to Kim. Kim, we have 2 photos from you, one landscape capture and one dog here. So a landscape capture, Sony, I'm not sure, i9, I would say. But anyway, from the lens, 50 millimeters here. And from the camera settings, ISO 100, f14 and 1/250th of a second. So from the camera settings, it's all good here. Nice and low ISO, f14 giving you, again, details all the way through. Like I said, my to-go settings is somewhere around f7.1 and f11. I think in that case, you're getting the most out of your lens. And yeah, it just generally works better for me. 1/250th of a second gives you that kind of frozen look with the frozen water, which again looks quite nice. Little bit of the highlights on the water, but nothing crazy. So in overall, very nicely captured. when we zoom in, the sharpness is quite decent. Yeah. I mean, it's not super sharp. I think maybe the sharpness is more on water, but it looks good. And noise wise, on the main image, it looks quite good. Now, looking at the sky, you can see a little bit of the glow around, which kind of gives me a hint of sky replacement in this area, and so on. So, welcome to that. So I think technically it's quite well done. Now, when it comes to composition and artistic part of the image, I think it's very lovely. I like the balance. I like the idea of the centerpiece in the middle, creating a really nice opening. I think the river actually creates a really nice flow, leading us towards the main subject. So I think all of this is nicely done. Also, the crop and framing with the 1/3 of a sky, I think can work really well. So all in all, very good job. Just when we come to the editing part, this is where I think the sky becomes very quickly very obvious. So I don't know what was the original sky, if it was a blue or what do you use, but yeah, it's definitely something you need to keep an eye on. I think personally, I love sky replacement. I think it can help the image a lot, but it really needs to be done in a way where you can notice it. Now I have several sky replacement tutorials on the YouTube channel, Clever Photographer. So if you need a little bit of help or want to see some inspiration, I would definitely suggest you to check that. So that's the first image. Now moving on to this lovely capture here. Now that's very, very lovely. I love the details. I love the drops. I love the framing. That is beautiful. So again, Sony i9, I guess. No lens data here. Not much of a data for the camera settings, so that's fine. Let's just move on the image itself. So as I mentioned, lovely sharpness, lovely frozen moment with the drops, lovely color, light, everything really works well here. So really well done, Kim. I think this is beautiful, beautiful capture. When it comes to the composition, I think it's very nicely done. Again, you know, ducks are, or this type of birds, again in the water, are not extremely rare. So this is where we have to really find very intriguing framing to make it work. And I think in this case, it's really nicely done. So definitely image to be proud of. From the post-processing, I enjoy this image a lot. I like the natural edit, the natural colors. I think all of that can work really well together and it's well done. So Kim, well done. Well done on both of the photos. Obviously with the ducks, again, as I mentioned, really nicely done. With this one, just keep an eye on the sky replacement there. Moving forward, Zdeněk. We have Zdeněk back again with two images. We have one landscape photo and one wildlife capture right here. So we're going to start with the first image, Canon M6 with 11 to 22 millimeters. From the camera settings on this one, ISO 100, f9 and 1/250th of a second. So from the camera settings, Zdeněk, spot on here, nice and low ISO, good f-stop here, nice shutter speed. So all of that works really well. Zooming in, good level of sharpness, no noise. So all of that is good too. And yeah, from the technical part, very well captured. From the artistic part, looking at it, my first impression is that I would like to have just a little bit more sky there. I think it seems just a little bit cropped out. If I could get just maybe 1 more inch, I would quite like that. But everything else works really well. I really like that. I like the reflection in the water. I like the depth, the foreground, the shadows, the texture in the sky. All of that is just really nicely done and well made together. Looking at the image, talking about post-processing, it maybe is a little bit more on a warmer side. I wonder if we could just maybe bring the warmth down. It's either the warmth or the saturation, which I think needs to be adjusted. So to do that, we can go into the develop tool and bring the temperature down just a little bit, maybe somewhere around -17. And when we look at the before, I think it just makes it a little bit more natural. So that's what I would do here. Other than that, I don't have much to add here. I think it looks really, really good. It's well put together and well captured. Now, looking at the second image, and the wildlife capture here of Nyala. if I'm right. I hope I'm right. Anyway, this is captured with Canon 77D with 100 to 400 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 800, 400 millimeters on the lens, f7.1 and 1,000 of a second. 1/1000 of a second to make sure that we get this incredible sharpness with the 400 millimeters, also a really lovely background, and altogether a great capture. Zdeněk, I will not be able to tell you much on this because it's really well done and it's beautiful. I love the details, I love the composition, the framing, the colors, the light, everything works really well together. So yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful capture, well put together, well framed, well edited. And yeah, nicely done. I showed you the transformation to black and white many times, so I will not do that, but just congratulations on a beautiful picture. And thank you, as always, for sending both of your images over. And then brings us nicely to the last photographer. Tony, we have some more nature photos from you, so thank you for sending them over. Of course, that I'm always super happy to see your flower shots, but this time I'm even more excited to see some animals, butterflies and dragonflies here. So let's start with the butterfly here. Beautiful, beautiful capture. Again, playing around with the lovely skill you have with the composition and contrast of the colors. I think this is just really nicely put together. So this one captured with Canon 50D with the lens 18 to 135 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 200, f5.6 and 1/320th of a second. So all of that good, very well balanced ISO, f5.6 giving you that lovely kind of soft background, 1/320th of a second giving us nice sharpness, nice exposure. I really like the light as well. I think that works well together. And yeah, it's just, yeah, it's very well put together. Now there is a little bit of noise, but nothing major. I think all in all, it's just really, really lovely photo. Composition wise, yeah, beautiful. Contrast of the color. So, you know, the orange on the green and purple, the depth, the main subject, the level of details. Yeah, just everything works really well. So very nice. Post-processing, I wouldn't add anything. I think it's nicely done. You could easily also crop this image to square and it would look good as well. It would just add a little bit more attention towards the butterfly, but you choose this and I think it works very well. Another image is the dragonfly, which is obviously a different sort of image. I think with this one, it's more kind of your cover of the magazine, nice saturation, interesting subject, lots happening, lots of kind of colors and movement, where this one is more your National Geographic kind of scientific capture with lots of details, maybe a little bit overexposed wings, but still good sharpness, lovely background, and well captured together photo. Before we finish, just a few more examples of your work to make sure that we look at them as well. Again, great square capture, lovely contrast of the main subject and the background, well put together there. This is also really beautiful. I love the light, I love the texture around, the colors, the saturation, really, really well put together. And finally, this is also a lovely picture. Lovely soft background with a lovely glow, great contrast, beautiful level of details, beautiful light, and beautifully captured together. Tony, thank you so much again for sending your images over. It's always my pleasure to see them. And I have to say that the butterfly image is one of my favorite this week. It's really, really pretty. Folks, thank you very much for sending your images over. It was my pleasure to review them. Now, I am away next week for a photography show in Coventry, here in England, but I will be back the week after to look at your images again. So if you have images, make sure you send them over. Pauline will be over to share the link with you, and I can't wait to see you again in 2 weeks. So thank you again, have a good afternoon, and I'll speak to you all soon.